Get your hands on the hood and shut your mouth, old man, before I put a bullet in you!
Violently kicking the tire iron into the dirt, he grabs 71-year-old Augustus Pemberton by the throat and brutally slams his fragile body face first against the midnight blue Cadillac.
Look at your dark skin, look at your filthy clothes. You honestly expect me to believe an old black man like you actually owns a $40,000 luxury classic?
This is my car!
Liar! Who the hell did you rob, Grandpa? People like you don't build masterpieces, you steal them!
Augustus stays completely still, his open palms pressed flat against the warm metal. But Hartman viciously wrenches his arm up behind his back until it threatens to snap. The crowd gasps in horror as the deputy rips a worn leather notebook out of the old man's pocket and spits on the ground at his feet.
Stop playing civilized with me. You're just a parasite hiding behind gray hair. I'm throwing your old ass in a cage where you belong, and we'll invent the charges at the station.
Hartman barks every word, completely consumed by unchecked malice. Hartman smiles, drunk on his own cruel power, and he has absolutely no idea what he has just done, because this defenseless elderly man is not a thief. He is a legendary retired federal appeals court judge, and the newly appointed chairman of the very Police Accountability Review Board, created to police this department. In less than 1 hour, that destroyed notebook and a single rolling body camera are going to ruin Deputy Cole Hartman's life forever. 19 days. That is how long Deputy Cole Hartman had been waiting to hear whether he made the cut for the county's brand new Police Accountability Review Board. 19 days of polishing his record, of bragging in the break room that the one open seat was as good as his, kind of dreaming about the bump in pay and the shiny new line on his resume. The board had one open chair, and one chairman who would decide who filled it. And on the best afternoon of the year, in front of his entire town, Deputy Cole Hartman had just thrown that chairman face first onto the hood of a Cadillac and called him a thief. He simply did not know it yet. But to understand the size of the hole this young man just dug for himself, you need to know exactly who Augustus Pemberton really is. Let me tell you about Augustus Pemberton, or at least the version of him that everybody in Holloway Ridge, North Carolina thinks they know. 71 years old. They call him Gus. He lives at the end of Sycamore Lane in a white farmhouse with green shutters and a porch swing that he oils every spring so it never squeaks. He grows tomatoes that win ribbons at the county fair. He fixes old cars in a barn out back, the kind of cars other men drive 200 miles to bring him because Gus Pemberton can make a dead engine breathe again like nobody else in 3 counties. He wears the same kind of clothes every day. Faded work shirts, canvas trousers, boots that have seen 1,000 miles. He waves at every car that passes, whether they wave back or not. To the town of Holloway Ridge. Gus is a retired school teacher. That is what they assume. Anyway, a quiet old black man with grease under his fingernails and a soft voice, puttering around with his tomatoes and his antique cars. Harmless, invisible. The kind of man you nod at in the hardware store and forget about by the time you reach your truck. Nobody ever asks him what he actually did for a living. And Gus has never volunteered it. Not because he is ashamed. Lord, no. Because he learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing a man can do is let people underestimate him. And then watch, quietly, patiently, what they reveal about themselves when they think nobody important is looking. There is a whole education to be had in that. A man shows you exactly who he is in the way he treats the person he believes cannot help him or hurt him. Gus has spent a lifetime watching people fail that test, and a lifetime watching a rare few pass it, and he has learned to tell the difference inside of about 10 seconds. He was not always old. He was not always quiet. Either. There was a time, a long time ago, when Augustus Pemberton was a sharp young man in a borrowed suit, the first in his family to finish high school, let alone college, let alone the thing that came after college. He grew up 9 miles from where he sits now. in a part of the county that does not have a Founder's Day, in a house with no indoor plumbing, the son of a man who fixed cars in other men's garages for wages that would shame you to hear. His father's hands were always black with grease, and his father never once owned a single one of the beautiful machines he kept running. Gus learned engines at his father's elbow before he learned long division. And he swore, "Asa boy," two things: that he would one day own a car as beautiful as the ones his father fixed for other men, and that he would find a way to spend his life making sure the rules applied to everyone, not just the people who wrote them. He kept both promises. It just took him about 60 years. Here is a detail that seems small but is not. Every single morning, before he pulls on his boots, Gus slides a ring onto the third finger of his right hand. It is a heavy gold ring, scratched and worn smooth at the edges, with a small dark stone and an inscription on the inside band that has nearly rubbed away. His late wife, Eleanor, gave it to him the day he was sworn in, 40 years ago, and she pressed it into his palm and folded his fingers over it and said, "Don't you ever let them make you forget who you are." Eleanor has been gone 3 years now. He never takes the ring off except to wash dishes. When people ask, he says it was a gift from a colleague. That is technically true. The colleague was the President of the United States. Keep that ring in the back of your mind. We will come back to it. And when we do, it is going to change everything. And here is one more thing. In the breast pocket of every shirt Gus owns, there is a small leather notebook, soft and cracked with age, held shut by a rubber band. He writes in it most days. Dates, names, small observations in a careful, slanting hand. The neighbors think he is writing down recipes, or things to fix, or the names of his grandchildren. They are wrong about that too. What is in that notebook is the single most dangerous document in Halloway County. And not one soul besides Gus knows it exists. Halloway Ridge, North Carolina. Population 18,000. 81% white. It is the kind of place where folks put their hands over their hearts at the Friday night football game and say grace before supper, and genuinely believe they would never, ever treat a man differently because of the color of his skin. And it is also the kind of place where a black family that moves onto the wrong street finds out real fast which neighbors stop waving. The Halloway County Sheriff's Department has 62 deputies. 7 of them are black. Over the past 2 years, the department has received 9 formal complaints of excessive force or unlawful detention. 8 of those 9 complaints were filed by black residents. All 9 were reviewed internally. All 9 were dismissed. 9 for 9. A flawless record. If you are the kind of person who measures a department by how few of its own it punishes, it got bad enough, loud enough, that the county commission did something almost unheard of. They voted to create a Civilian Police Accountability Review Board, an independent body with real teeth. The power to review body camera footage, to subpoena records, to recommend discipline that the sheriff could not simply bury. The first board of its kind in the history of the county. You should understand how rare that is. Most towns like Halloway Ridge never get that far. Most towns, the complaints pile up quietly in a drawer somewhere, and the people who filed them learn to stop filing them. And the whole rotten arrangement just continues. Year after year, decade after decade, because the people being harmed have no power, and the people doing the harm have all of it. The only reason Halloway Ridge got an accountability board at all is that one of those 9 complaints was filed by the daughter of a county commissioner, a young woman named Keisha Holloway, pulled over on her way home from her job at the hospital and made to sit on the curb in the rain while a deputy searched her car and found nothing and let her go without so much as an apology. Keisha went home and cried, and then she got angry. And then she told her mother, the commissioner, and her mother did something most people in this story could not do. Her mother had the power to make somebody listen. That is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this whole tale. And we are going to keep circling back to it. The system only moved when someone with power got hurt. 8 other people, 8 people without a commissioner for a mother filed the exact same kind of complaint and got nothing. It took the 9th, the one with connections, to crack the door open even an inch, and they needed a chairman, someone with unimpeachable credentials, someone who understood the law from the inside out, who could not be intimidated, who would not be golfing buddies with the sheriff. The commission searched for months. They flew in candidates from out of state. They interviewed retired police chiefs and law professors and former prosecutors. And none of them felt right. Because every one of them was, in some way, still part of the same world they were being asked to oversee. And then, 6 weeks ago, a junior staffer doing background research stumbled onto a name in an old federal court registry, cross-referenced it against the county property rolls almost by accident, and realized that one of the most distinguished legal minds in the entire country had quietly retired to a farmhouse at the end of Sycamore Lane, in Holloway Ridge, growing tomatoes, where he had been living, unbothered and unrecognized, for the better part of 4 years. The town does not know that yet. The appointment has not been announced. The first official meeting is still days away. As far as Holloway Ridge is concerned, the new chairman of the Police Accountability Review Board is just old Gus Pemberton, the man who fixes cars. Now, the young man with the badge, Deputy Cole Hartman, 29 years old, born in Holloway Ridge, raised in Holloway Ridge, sworn in right here 3 years ago. His father drove a delivery route. His mother taught Sunday school. Cole was a high school athlete. Popular, quick with a joke. The kind of young man older folks called a good boy, and meant it as the highest compliment they had. He is, by most accounts, friendly. He coaches a youth baseball team on the weekends. He helps old ladies carry groceries to their cars, pull his stop records. Though, and a different picture comes into focus. 341 stops in 3 years. 64% of them involved Black or Latino drivers, in a county that is more than 80% white. Read that number again. 64%. That is not a coincidence. That is not bad luck. That is a pattern carved so deep into a man's daily habits that he no longer even sees it. And here is the thing about Cole Hartman that makes this whole story matter. He does not think he is racist. He would tell you that to your face and he would absolutely believe it. He has black friends. He coaches black kids. He would swear on his mother's Bible that he treats everyone the same. But what a man believes about himself and what the record shows about him are two entirely different conversations. And Cole Hartman has never once had the courage to sit down and have the second one. This is important. So let us sit with it for a moment. Because it is the engine of the entire tragedy. Cole Hartman is not a cartoon villain. He is not the kind of man who uses slurs or burns crosses or thinks of himself as hateful. If you described his stop record to him, the 64%, he would have an explanation ready for every single one. That neighborhood has more crime. That car looked suspicious. That guy was acting nervous, and he would believe every explanation. Because the alternative, the possibility that 1,000 small decisions made below the level of conscious thought have been quietly sorting human beings by the color of their skin, is a thing he cannot bear to look at directly. It would mean he is not who he thinks he is, and there is almost nothing a man will not do to avoid finding that out. That is what makes him dangerous. Not malice. Blindness. The deputy who knows he hates you will at least watch himself. The deputy who is certain he is one of the good ones never does. Because in his own mind he has nothing to watch for. Cole Hartman has spent 3 years harming people, while feeling, the entire time, like a hero. And he has never been forced to feel otherwise. Because every system above him, every sergeant and captain and sheriff, has worked, quietly and efficiently, to make sure he never had to. His supervisor is Sergeant Dale Whitcomb, 53, the kind of man who has been at the department so long that the building feels like an extension of his own body. When a complaint comes across his desk, Dale gives it a quick read, decides the deputy was probably justified, and signs it closed. He has done this for years. Complaint after complaint. Reviewed. Dismissed. Filed. Next. He is not a cruel man. He is a tired man who long ago decided that defending his deputies was the same thing as doing his job, and who has never once stopped to consider the difference. He signs the way most people sign for a package. He does not open it. He does not check what is inside. He just scribbles his name and moves it along. And the thing inside the package, the harm, the broken trust, the citizen who learns there is no point in ever complaining again. That is somebody else's problem. In some other department, on some other day, above him is Captain Marlene Osgood, who runs internal affairs, and who learned a long time ago that the path of least resistance is the path that keeps you employed. She signs what Dale sends up. She does not look closely. Looking closely, in her experience, only ever creates problems. And riding along with Cole Hartman today is a brand new deputy named Priya Anand, 25 years old, 4 months on the job, still learning where everything is. The only instruction anyone has ever given her about riding with Cole is this: he is one of the good ones. Back him up. Keep your mouth shut. And learn how it is done. She is going to learn something today. Just not what anybody intended. Founders Day in Holloway Ridge. The biggest day on the town calendar. Once a year. They shut down 4 blocks of Main Street and the whole county pours in. There are vendor tents and a barbecue cook-off and a stage where the high school jazz band plays. There is a classic car show down by the old courthouse, where men polish their chrome and lean against their fenders and pretend they are not waiting for someone to come admire their work. There are kids with cotton candy and dogs on leashes, and the mayor giving a speech nobody listens to. It is the one day a year the town puts on its very best face. Gus Pemberton comes to Founders Day every single year. He brings whichever car he has most recently finished, and he parks it down by the courthouse with the other entries. And he sits in a folding chair beside it, and lets people admire his work without ever bragging about it. This year he has brought the 1968 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Midnight blue. 4 years of his life under that hood. It is, without question, the most beautiful car in the show. And Gus knows it. And that quiet knowing is enough for him. He does not need a ribbon. There is a small, private joy in it for him that no one in Holloway Ridge could possibly understand. Because this is the car. This is the promise he made to himself as a barefoot boy watching his father coax life back into other men's automobiles for wages that would not feed a family. I will own one as beautiful as the ones he fixes. And here it is, gleaming in the autumn sun, registered in his name, paid for in full. Every panel and every chrome accent worked by his own hands in the long, quiet evenings after Eleanor passed. When the house got too silent and he needed something to do with his grief, he poured 4 years of mourning into this car. It is, in a way he would never say out loud, the most personal thing he owns. More personal than the ring. More personal than the notebook. It is his father's dream, and his wife's memory welded into one beautiful machine. So when a young deputy accuses him of stealing it, you should understand, it is not just a false charge. It is a knife slid directly into the softest, most sacred part of him. And the fact that he does not flinch when that knife goes in, the fact that he stays calm and patient and reasonable while a stranger calls his life's work stolen property, that is not because it does not hurt. It is because he has spent 71 years learning how to bleed without letting anyone see. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the festival is at its peak. Hundreds of people moving up and down Main Street in the warm autumn sun. Children with their faces painted. The smell of barbecue smoke and funnel cake. The high school jazz band working its way through an old standard. The trumpet a little flat. The way it always is. The way that makes it perfect. And down at the edge of the car show, in a parking lot half a block from the main stage, Gus Pemberton's Cadillac has a problem. The rear driver's side tire has gone flat. An oil. Most likely. Picked up on the drive into town. No matter. Gus has changed 1,000 tires. His father taught him before he could ride a bicycle. He pops the trunk, lifts out the spare and the jack, and gets to work in the corner of the parking lot. In full view of anyone walking past, an old black man in a faded work shirt, kneeling beside a gorgeous antique car, doing something as ordinary and as innocent as changing a tire, and that, it turns out, is enough to make somebody nervous. That is the whole sickness of it, distilled into a single image. There is nothing he could be doing that is more obviously harmless. And it is not enough, because the thing that makes someone nervous is not what he is doing. It is what he is. A woman named Glenda Foss is the one who makes the call. Glenda is 66. She volunteers at the Founders Day welcome tent. And she has spent her whole life in Holloway Ridge, believing herself to be a kind and decent person, which, in most contexts, she is. But Glenda sees an old black man crouched beside a luxury car that, in her mind, he could not possibly own, working at it with a tool in his hand, glancing around now and then the way anyone glances around, and something in the back of Glenda's mind, something she would deny to her dying breath, whispers that this does not look right, so she finds the nearest deputy, and the nearest deputy is Cole Hartman, working crowd control near the car show. With rookie Priya Anand a step behind him, there's a man over by the blue Cadillac. Glenda says, he's got some kind of tool and he keeps looking around. I think he might be trying to break into it. I just thought somebody should check. Cole Hartman notes, thanks, sir, and starts walking toward the parking lot. And right there, on the most ordinary errand a police officer can run, the worst day of Cole Hartman's life begins. He just does not know it yet. Here is what a good officer does in this situation. A good officer walks up, says good afternoon, and asks the man if everything is all right. A good officer notices, within about 3 seconds, that the man is calmly changing a flat tire, that the spare is half-mounted, that the lug nuts are sitting in a neat little row on the asphalt, and that this is the single most obviously innocent scene imaginable. A good officer says, have a nice day, sir, tips his hat, and moves along. Cole Hartman is not, today, going to be a good officer. He does not walk up to Gus and say good afternoon. Instead, he does something that tells you everything about what is happening inside his head. He slows down about 15 feet away, puts his hand on the grip of his holstered weapon, and circles the Cadillac at a wide, wary distance. The way you would circle a thing you have already decided is dangerous. He looks at the car. He looks at the tools on the ground. He looks at the old man. And in his mind, the story has already been written. And the old man is already the villain in it. Afternoon. This your vehicle? Gus looks up from the lug nut he is loosening. He takes the measure of the young man in one slow glance. The hand on the weapon, the wide stance, the hard set of the jaw, and he answers in a voice as calm and warm as the autumn afternoon itself. Good afternoon. Officer. Yes. Sir. It is. I'm changing a flat. Picked up a nail somewhere on the highway. I expect. Stand up. Step away from the vehicle. I'm right in the middle of mounting the spare. If I step away now, the car's going to come down off the jack. Give me 1 moment to set it down safe, and I'll be happy to stand and talk with you. I didn't ask you to explain. I said step away from the vehicle, and so Augustus Pemberton, who has changed 1,000 tires, sets down his tire iron, raises his open hands, and rises to his feet, slowly, carefully, making sure his hands stay visible the entire time. He does not say another word about the car. He has done a version of this before. Not this exact thing, but this. The questioning, the hand on the weapon, the careful, deliberate calculation of how to stay alive during an encounter that should never have been an encounter at all. Every black man in America knows this choreography. You learn it the way you learn to tie your shoes. The difference is that getting it wrong does not mean a loose lace. What's your name? Augustus Pemberton. You got ID on you. It's in the car. In my jacket on the passenger seat. I'm happy to get it for you. But I'm going to tell you before I move so you know what I'm reaching for. Is that all right? Don't reach for anything. Where do you live? Sycamore Lane. End of the road. White house with green shutters. I've lived in this county a long time. Officer, longer than you've been alive. I'd wager that last part is not a boast and it is not a threat. It is simply true. And Gus says it the way you would mention the weather. But it lands on Cole Hartman as a kind of insolence. Because in Cole's mind the old man is supposed to be afraid. And afraid people do not make calm observations about how long they have lived somewhere. Calmies. To a certain kind of officer, its own form of disrespect. They want to see the fear. The fear is how they know they are in charge, and this old man is not giving it to them. And that absence is already beneath the surface, making Cole Hartman angry in a way he could not name if you asked him. Cole Hartman is not listening anyway. Not really. He is looking at the car, this gleaming $40,000 restored Cadillac. And he is looking at the old man's grease-stained work shirt and worn boots. And the math is not adding up in his head. And instead of stopping to consider that maybe his math is built on a rotten assumption, he leans in harder on the assumption. That is the move. That is the move that turns a misunderstanding into a catastrophe, when the facts do not fit the story. A wise man changes the story. Cole Hartman is not, today, a wise man. When the facts do not fit his story, he decides the facts must be lying. This is a real nice car. Real expensive. You telling me this is yours? I built it. Took me 4 years. Every bolt in that engine. I turned myself. You got the title registration. In the glove box. Same as my ID. In the car. Officer, I'd be glad to show you every piece of paper you want to see. The registration is current. The car is mine. Free and clear. Now I'm going to ask you, gently, to let me reach into that car and get you what you're asking for. Because right now you're asking me to prove something and forbidding me from proving it in the same breath. That last sentence lands. It is calm. It is logical. It is absolutely correct. And it makes Cole Hartman's face go tight. Because somewhere underneath his certainty, he knows the old man is right. And being shown you are wrong by a man you have already decided is beneath you is a particular kind of humiliation that some men respond to by getting smaller and some men respond to by getting meaner. Cole Hartman gets meaner. You know what? You keep your hands where I can see them. Deputy Anand. Watch him. He's getting agitated. Priya Anand. 4 months on the job. Looks at the old man, who has not raised his voice, who has not moved a muscle, whose hands are still lifted in plain view. And she thinks, very quietly to herself, he is not agitated. He is the calmest person in this parking lot. But the only instruction she has ever been given is to back him up and keep her mouth shut. So she keeps her mouth shut. She does, however, do one small thing. She makes sure her body camera is recording, and she angles herself just slightly so that the lens has a clear, clean view of everything. That small decision is going to matter more than she could possibly imagine. But before we go further, you need to understand what was actually written in that little leather notebook. Because it is the secret heart of this entire story. For 19 months, people had been coming to Gus Pemberton's porch. It started by accident. A young man named Terrence, who delivered Gus's feed and supplies, mentioned one afternoon that he'd been pulled over 3 times in a single week on the same stretch of road. Searched each time. Ticketed for nothing. and that when he tried to file a complaint, the woman at the front desk of the sheriff's department had looked at him like he was wasting her time, and the complaint had vanished into nothing within 48 hours. Terrence did not know Gus was a retired federal judge. Nobody did. He was just talking, the way you talk to a kindly old man while you unload sacks of feed. But Gus listened, and Gus asked questions. The right questions. Quiet, but easy. Lawyerly questions. And when Terrence left, Gus took out his notebook and wrote down everything. The dates, the location, the deputy's description, the disappeared complaint, and then Terrence told someone, that old man on Sycamore. He listens. He writes it down. He acts like it matters, and that someone came to and told someone else. And for 19 months, a quiet underground stream of people who had nowhere else to turn made their way to a farmhouse at the end of a dirt road to tell an old man their stories. Because he was the only person in Holloway County who would write them down as though they were true. There was Denise, a nurse, pulled over on her way home from a double shift, made to stand in the rain while a deputy went through her purse. There was a 17-year-old named Marcus, walking home from his job at the grocery store after dark, stopped and frisked and told he matched a description that was never produced, of a suspect who never existed. There was an elderly woman named Ruth, whose grandson was handcuffed in her own front yard for the crime of carrying a television out of her house, his own grandmother's house, where he had just helped her set up the new set she'd saved 6 months to buy. There was a school teacher, a deacon, a delivery driver, a college student home for the summer. Different people, different days. The same story, over and over and over. 19 months, 41 separate incidents, everyone documented in a careful, slanting hand, with dates and times and badge numbers where Gus could get them, and cross-references to the relevant statutes in a code only a federal judge would know by heart. It was not a diary. It was a brief, a meticulous, devastating, irrefutable legal brief, built one porch conversation at a time, waiting for the day it would be needed. Gus had not gone looking for the accountability board. The board had come looking for him, and when the commission's representative sat in his living room 6 weeks ago and explained what they wanted him to do, Gus had listened quietly, and then he had walked to his bedroom and returned with a small cracked leather notebook held shut by a rubber band. And he had set it on the coffee table and said, "I believe I have been preparing for this conversation for some time without knowing it." So, when Deputy Cole Hartman, on Founders Day, in front of 30 cameras, tears that notebook out of an old man's pocket and rips out a handful of pages and stuffs it into his uniform like a trophy, he is not destroying an old man's scribbles. He is destroying the evidence in 19 months of civil rights violations, submitted to an incoming oversight official. On video, he has just committed, on camera, a federal felony, in the service of covering up 40 other ones he knows nothing about. He has no idea. None of them do. Not yet. The notebook is still, at this moment, in the breast pocket of Gus Pemberton's shirt, undiscovered. But it is coming, and so is everything else. Officer, I have not done anything. I have shown you nothing but courtesy. I have offered to produce every document you have asked for. You have not told me a single law I am suspected of breaking. Now I will ask you, for my own understanding, what is the crime here? What did somebody tell you I did? We got a report of a possible vehicle break-in. I see. And does it look to you, right now, standing where you are standing, like a man breaking into a car? Or does it look like a man changing a flat tire because the spare is half-mounted? The lug nuts are sitting right there in a row, and the jack is under the frame. I am asking you to use your own 2 eyes. And here, for just 1 second, Cole Hartman hesitates, because the old man is right. He can see it, the half-mounted tire, The neat row of lug nuts. The jack. Everything about the scene screams the truth. For one fragile second, the good officer Cole tells everyone he is almost surfaces. Almost says, "You know what? Sir, my mistake. You have a good day," and then his pride swallows it whole. Because to walk away now is to admit, in front of his rookie partner, in front of the gathering edge of a Founders Day crowd, that he circled a man with his hand on his gun over nothing, that he was wrong, and Cole Hartman would rather be cruel than be wrong. Hands on the trunk. "Now, I'm not going to tell you again." Gus looks at him for a long moment, and then he makes a decision that costs him something, that costs every man in his position something. The decision to comply with an unlawful order because the alternative is a young, frightened, armed man making a tragic mistake. He places his open palms flat on the trunk of his own Cadillac. The car he built with his own hands. The car registered in his own name. And he lets a man who has found no evidence of any crime pat him down like a criminal. In broad daylight. At the town festival. While the neighbors begin to gather and stare, Cole runs his hands down the old man's sides. His legs. His arms. Finds nothing. Of course. A wallet. A set of keys. A small leather notebook held shut with a rubber band. Cole pulls the notebook out of the breast pocket and flips it open. Pages of dates. Names. Small, careful observations in a slanting hand. He does not understand what he is looking at. He sees an old man's scribbles. "The hell is this?" "That is my personal notebook. I would appreciate it if you put it back in my pocket. I'll decide what I do with it." And he tosses it, casually, contemptuously, onto the hood of the car, where it slides and nearly falls to the asphalt. Gus's eyes follow it, just for a second, and in that second, the cold, patient thing in his face deepens by a few more degrees. By now, a small crowd has formed at the edge of the parking lot. 20 people, maybe 30. Some of them recognize Gus. "Isn't that the fella who fixes cars, the one out on Sycamore?" Murmurs run through the crowd. A few phones come out and start recording. Cole Hartman feels the eyes on his back. And instead of letting the audience cool him down, the audience cranks him up. Because now there are witnesses to whatever he decides this is. And his pride will not let it be a mistake. He keys his shoulder radio. "Dispatch. This is Hartman. I need a second unit down by the courthouse car show. I've got an uncooperative subject. Possible vehicle theft. Requesting backup." And that word, theft, said out loud into the radio, in front of the crowd, lands on Augustus Pemberton like a slap. Not theft of an idea, not a misunderstanding. Theft. The accusation that he stole the very thing he built with his own two hands over. He does not flinch, but somewhere deep in his chest, an old anger. The kind of anger a black man in America learns to fold up small and carry quietly his whole life. Unfolds itself, one notch. "Officer," Gus says, and his voice has changed now. Still calm, but with iron underneath it. "You have just told your dispatcher and these 30 people that I am a car thief. I want you to understand exactly what you have done. You have made a public accusation of a felony against a man who has shown you nothing but cooperation, based on no evidence whatsoever. Because you decided, the moment you saw me, that a man who looks like me could not possibly own a car like this. I want you to sit with that. I don't have to sit with anything. You're detained until I can verify ownership. Then verify it. The papers are 18 inches away in that glove box. You have refused to let me get them and refused to get them yourself. So which is it? Am I detained because you can't verify ownership? Or can't you verify ownership because you won't let anyone touch the papers that would verify it?" That is the second time the old man has caught him in the exact same logical trap. And being caught twice, in public, by a man he had filed away in his mind as helpless, breaks something loose in Cole Hartman. He grabs Gus by the arm. Hard. and wrenches it behind his back. You think you're smart, turn around. You're under arrest. For what? Resisting. Obstruction. We'll figure out the rest at the station. And there it is. The phrase that has ended 1,000 stories badly. We'll figure out the rest at the station. Arrest first. Find the crime later. The exact inversion of everything the badge is supposed to mean. This is the moment. And what happens in this moment is the entire reason this story is worth telling. Because Augustus Pemberton, with his arm twisted behind his back, his cheek inches from the hood of his own car, surrounded by a crowd of his neighbors filming on their phones, does not shout. He does not struggle. He does not curse. He does the single most powerful thing a man can do in that situation. He goes completely, utterly still. And he speaks in a voice so calm and so clear that everyone in that parking lot can hear every word. Officer Hartman, I am not resisting. My body is relaxed. My hands are open. There are 30 cameras pointed at us. And every one of them will show that I have not raised a hand to you, raised my voice to you, or done one single thing other than ask you questions you could not answer. So, I am going to tell you something. And I want you to hear it clearly. Because in about an hour, you are going to wish, more than you have ever wished for anything, that you had listened to me right now. Cole Hartman pauses. He does not know why. Something in the old man's voice. The total absence of fear. He has arrested frightened men. Angry men. Drunk men. Defiant men. He has never arrested a man who sounded like this. Like a teacher waiting patiently for a slow student to arrive at the answer on his own. You are not detaining a car thief. Gus says, there is no car thief. There never was. You are arresting an innocent man for the crime of changing his own tire while being the wrong color in your town. And you are doing it in front of witnesses. On camera. After he gave you every chance in the world to walk away clean. I gave you those chances on purpose. Soon. I gave you every single one. And you took none of them. And then Gus says the thing that will be replayed on every news broadcast in the state for the next 2 weeks. He turns his head. Just slightly. So the rookie's body camera catches his face full and clear. And he says, I have spent my entire life inside the law. I know exactly which of my rights you have broken. In what order? And under which statute? And I promise you, before this day is over, you are going to learn my name. All of you. You are going to learn exactly who you put your hands on today. The crowd goes quiet. Cole Hartman's grip loosens. Just slightly. Without his meaning it to. And in the distance, a second patrol car pulls into the lot. And Sergeant Dale Whitcomb steps out. The supervisor, 53 years old. The man who signs the complaints closed without reading them. Come to see what all the fuss is about. He is about to find out. Sergeant Dale Whitcomb walks up with the slow, heavy gait of a man who has broken up 100 squabbles and expects this to be the 101st. He takes in the scene. The old man bent over the car, his deputy holding him. The crowd. The phones. What have we got? Hartman. Possible vehicle theft. Sarge. Subject's uncooperative. Won't verify ownership. I've got him detained. Dale looks at the old man. And here is where the story could have turned. Because Dale Whitcomb has lived in this county his whole life. And somewhere in the back of his tired mind, a small bell is ringing. I know this man. Where do I know this man from? But the bell is faint. And the path of least resistance is to back his deputy. And so Dale does what Dale always does. He backs his deputy. Sir, we just need to confirm the car is yours. You make this easy. This is over in 2 minutes. I have been trying to make it easy for 15 minutes. Sergeant, the papers are in the glove box. Your deputy will not let me reach them, and will not reach them himself. I have asked him repeatedly. There are 30 witnesses. So, with respect, The only person making this hard is wearing one of your uniforms. Dale glances at Cole. Cole's jaw is set. Dale sighs the sigh of a man who would rather not deal with paperwork on a festival day. And he makes the decision that, in about an hour, is going to end his career. Hartman, go ahead and check the glove box. Cole opens the passenger door. Leon's in. Pops the glove box. Pulls out a registration in a clear plastic sleeve. Reads it. And his face changes, because the registration says, in clean black letters, Augustus Tay. Pemberton, 1968 Cadillac DeVille. Owner of record. Free and clear. Exactly as the old man said. No lien. No theft report. Nothing. The car is, and has always been, completely and unambiguously, his. There is a long, terrible silence. Dale clears his throat. Well, there it is. Hartman, let the man go. Sir, we apologize for the inconvenience. These things happen. You understand, we have to check. And that, right there, would have been the end of it. An apology. A handshake. The crowd disperses. Everyone goes home. Except for what Cole Hartman does next. Because Cole Hartman, 29 years old, his pride flayed raw in front of his sergeant and his rookie and 30 neighbors, cannot stand to simply let the old man go. He has to find something. He has to be right about something. And so he does the thing that turns a bad afternoon into a federal case. He grabs the small leather notebook off the hood of the car, the one with all the dates and names, and he holds it up. What about this? Then subject was carrying this. Looks like he's been surveilling people, recording license plates. Names. Times. That's stalking material. I want this logged as evidence. That is not yours to take. Gus says. And for the first time, there is steel in his voice, and no warmth at all. Put it down. Yeah, make me. Altman and Cole Hartman. In a final act of contempt. In front of every camera. Opens the notebook. Tears out a handful of pages. And stuffs the whole thing into his uniform pocket like a trophy. Augustus Pemberton straightens up. The arm is released now. He stands at his full height. And he looks at the young deputy. And then at the sergeant. And then at the crowd. And when he speaks, his voice carries to the very back of the parking lot. That notebook, he says, contains 19 months of documentation. Names, dates, times, and circumstances of every single unlawful stop, every act of excessive force, and every false accusation made by the deputies of this department, reported to me by the citizens of this county, who had nowhere else to turn. You have just seized it, illegally, and torn out the pages. On camera, Sergeant Whitcomb, Deputy Hartman, Deputy Anand, I am going to give you all one last chance to understand what is happening here. And then I am going to make a phone call. And after that phone call, nothing in your lives will ever be the same. What phone call? Cole sneers. Who you gonna call? Old man. Your lawyer. No. Gus says quietly. The county commission, because in 4 days, I am being sworn in as the chairman of the Police Accountability Review Board that was created to oversee this department. The board you applied to. Deputy Hartman, I read your application this morning over my coffee. The silence that follows is the kind of silence you can feel in your teeth. Sergeant Dale Whitcomb's face has gone the color of old paper, because now the faint bell in the back of his mind has finished ringing. And he knows, where he has seen this man before. And it was on the front page of the county paper 6 weeks ago, under a headline about the new oversight board. Except the photo was old, and the man in it wore a suit. And Dale had glanced at it and thought, good, somebody competent, and turned the page. and never once connected the dignified man in the newspaper to the old fella who fixes cars on Sycamore Lane. But it gets worse for them. So much worse. Because the notebook and the board appointment, as devastating as they are not even the whole truth. They are not even close. Sergeant, Gus says, would you do me the courtesy of reading the inscription on the inside of this ring? He slides the heavy gold ring off his right hand and holds it out. Dale takes it with a shaking hand and turns it toward the light. The inscription is worn. Éligible to Han. T. Pemberton, United States Court of Appeals. Fourth Circuit, with the gratitude of a nation. Dale Whitcomb reads it twice, and then his knees actually buckle, just slightly, and he has to put a hand on the Cadillac to steady himself, because Augustus Pemberton is not a retired school teacher. Augustus Pemberton is a retired federal judge. For 22 years he sat on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, the second highest court in the entire federal system. One step below the Supreme Court of the United States. He was nominated by a president and confirmed by the Senate. He wrote opinions that are taught in every law school in America. Opinions that law students underline and memorize and argue about. Opinions that begin with the words Pemberton, J, and end with the force of binding federal law across 5 states and more than 30 million people. He ruled on cases of police misconduct, civil rights, and unlawful search and seizure that became the settled law of the land. The legal standard that governs what a police officer may and may not do during exactly the kind of stop that just occurred in this parking lot. The case that every officer in this state is supposed to be trained on. The precedent that defines the line Cole Hartman just sprinted across. Augustus Pemberton wrote it, with his own hand, in a chambers in Richmond, 20 years ago. Let that settle for a moment, because it is almost too perfect to be born. Sergeant Dale Whitcomb, Deputy Cole Hartman, and Deputy Priya Anand have spent the last 20 minutes violating, point by point, the constitutional rights of the very man who wrote the law defining those rights. They detained, without cause, the author of the standard for lawful detention. They searched, without a warrant, the man who wrote the opinion on warrantless searches. They accused of theft, in front of his own neighbors, one of the most respected jurists in the modern history of the American federal judiciary. They could not have chosen a worse man in the entire country to do this to, if they had tried for 100 years. When the county commission went looking for someone with unimpeachable credentials to chair their new accountability board, someone who understood policing and the law from the inside out, someone who could not be intimidated, bought, or fooled, they did not find a lucky amateur. They found a man whose name is in the Federal Reporters, whose portrait hangs in a courthouse 200 miles away, who retired not because he was finished, but because Eleanor got sick and he wanted to bring her home to the county where they were both born, and who stayed, after she passed, because leaving felt like leaving her, and who filled the long silent years with tomatoes and antique cars and a small leather notebook full of his neighbor's grief. I gave you every chance, Gus says again, very softly, taking the ring back and sliding it onto his finger, where it has lived for 40 years. I gave you every single chance to simply be decent, to look at an old man changing a tire and see a human being instead of a suspect. You could have said good afternoon and walked away, and none of this would be happening. I have been pulled over and made to feel small, more times in my life than you have years on this earth. Son. And I learned a long time ago to give the man in the uniform every possible opportunity to be better than the worst version of himself. I gave you those opportunities on purpose, one after another, and you took none of them. Not one. So now you are going to find out exactly who I am. And so is everyone else. What happens over the next 90 minutes happens fast. Gus does not shout. He does not gloat. He simply takes out his cell phone, dials a number from memory, and speaks quietly for 2 minutes. Then he hangs up and waits. calm as a man waiting for a kettle to boil. The first to arrive is the chairwoman of the county commission herself, a sharp woman named Patricia Holloway, whose family the town is named after, who drives up in a hurry because when a sitting nominee for the accountability board calls you on Founders Day and says, "I need you to come down to the courthouse car show right now and bring the county attorney," you come. She arrives, takes one look at the scene, the crowd, the phones, the gray-faced sergeant, the deputy with a torn-up notebook stuffed in his pocket, and her expression goes very flat and very serious. The county attorney arrives 2 minutes later. Then the sheriff himself, Sheriff Boyd Ackerman, summoned from the festival's main stage where he had been shaking hands and kissing babies, who walks up red-faced and blustering until he sees who is standing beside the Cadillac, and then goes very, very quiet. Augustus Pemberton tells the story once, plainly, for all of them. He does not exaggerate. He does not need to. He gestures to the 30 citizens with their phones, every one of whom captured every moment. He gestures to rookie Priya Anand, whose body camera ran clean the entire time. He produces the registration that proves the car was always his, and then he reaches out his hand. And Deputy Cole Hartman, ashen and shaking, removes the torn leather notebook from his pocket and places it back into the hand of the man he stole it from. "I want to be very clear about something," Gus says. To the sheriff, to the commissioner, to the attorney, in a voice loud enough for the crowd. This is not about me. If I were not who I am, this would have ended an hour ago with an old man arrested for a crime he did not commit. No cameras that anyone would bother to review. No phone call anyone would answer. The only thing that makes today different is an accident of who I happen to be. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is precisely the problem this board was created to solve. Sheriff Boyd Ackerman tries to do what sheriffs do. He tries to make it small. Your Honor, this is clearly a terrible misunderstanding. We'll handle this internally. I assure you my deputy will be. No, Gus says, quietly, and the single word stops. The sheriff cold. You will not handle this internally. That is the entire history of this department. Sheriff, handling things internally. 9 complaints in 2 years. All of them handled internally. All of them dismissed. That era ended today. In this parking lot. On camera. 6 weeks. That is how long it takes for the consequences to land. And when they land like a freight train. Deputy Cole Hartman is charged in federal court, not county court, with deprivation of rights under color of law. Under Titel 18. Section 242 of the United States Code. The very statute that governs exactly what he did. Unlawful detention, unlawful search, false arrest, and one additional charge that nobody but Gus saw coming: tampering with and destroying records of civilian complaints. A separate federal offense. For the moment, he tore the pages out of that notebook on camera. The notebook that was, in the eyes of the law, official documentation submitted to an incoming oversight official. Every charge carries prison time. Sergeant Dale Whitcomb is charged as well. Not with the assault. He never laid a hand on Gus. But with something that matters just as much: a pattern of falsifying internal review records. For years of signing complaints closed, without ever reviewing the available evidence. When investigators pulled the files, they found that in case after case, body camera footage existed that Dale had never watched. Eyewitness statements he had never read. Before signing his name and marking the matter resolved, Dale Whitcomb spent years believing that protecting his deputies was the same as doing his job. The law disagreed. There is a moment, weeks later, in a federal investigator's interview room, that nobody films but that everyone involved will remember. Dale Whitcomb, sitting across a metal table, is shown a stack of the complaints he signed closed. And beside each one, the evidence he never looked at, the footage, the statements, and he is asked a simple question. Did you review this before you signed it? And Dale, 53 years old, a man who genuinely believed his whole career that he was one of the good ones, opens his mouth to say what he has always said, that the deputy was justified, that these things are complicated, that you have to back your people, and nothing comes out, because for the first time, the evidence is sitting right there in front of him, and he can see, in his own signature, on document after document, the shape of what he actually did. He did not protect his deputies. He protected their worst instincts, and he sacrificed his neighbors to do it. 41 of them, one careless signature at a time. He puts his head in his hands. He does not say anything for a long while, and when he finally speaks, all he says is, I should have read them. I should have read everyone. It is, in its way, the truest thing he has ever said. Captain Marlene Osgood, who ran internal affairs, is not criminally charged, but she is removed from her position and referred for administrative action for failure of supervisory oversight. Her career in law enforcement is, for all practical purposes, finished. She just does not have handcuffs to show for it. Sheriff Boyd Ackerman survives. Barely. But only after agreeing to the thing he fought hardest against, because the real consequence, the one that outlasts any individual punishment, is this: the county and the Federal Department of Justice enter into a formal agreement, a consent decree, a binding legal contract that says, in essence, you will fix this, or we will fix it for you. And the terms are not vague. Every internal affairs investigation will now be reviewed by the Independent Accountability Review Board. No more department investigating itself. Every deputy will undergo annual bias training with mandatory recertification. Not a one-time seminar. Every year. Every officer. No exception. All body camera footage in any complaint will be reviewed by the civilian board. Not by a sergeant. Not by a captain. By citizens of the community, with the authority to watch the tapes and ask the hard questions. And a brand new complaint system will route every citizen complaint directly to the board's independent office, bypassing the chain of command entirely, so that no Dale Whitcomb can ever again make a complaint disappear with a signature. Deputy Cole Hartman's termination hearing lasts 20 minutes. He walks in wearing a suit instead of a uniform for the first time in 3 years. His badge and his service weapon are collected at the door. He signs the papers. Nobody shakes his hand. He carries his belongings out in a cardboard box. Past the youth baseball trophy, he won with the kids he coached. And his trial in federal court is set for the spring, in a courtroom far from Holloway Ridge, before a judge who does not golf with the sheriff, in front of a jury that is not drawn from the same 18,000 people who clapped for him at Founders Day, and Deputy Priya Anand. Priya is not charged. Priya did the one thing in that parking lot that turned out to matter. She made sure her camera was running. And she angled it clean. And she preserved the footage. And when the investigators came, she told them the truth. The whole truth. Even the part where she stood by and said nothing while it was happening. She does not pretend to be a hero. She would be the first to tell you she should have spoken up in the moment, and did not. 4 months on the job. Told to keep her mouth shut and learn. She kept her mouth shut, but when the moment came to choose between protecting the institution and telling the truth, she chose the truth. And that choice, combined with one rolling camera, cracked the whole thing open. She transfers, under the new consent decree, to a position that did not exist at the Holloway County Sheriff's Department 6 weeks earlier, Community Accountability Liaison. The bridge between the department and the people it is supposed to serve. It is, in a small and quiet way, a kind of redemption. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from one young person deciding, in the hardest moment, to point the camera at the truth and leave it running. And Augustus Pemberton, 4 days after Founders Day, exactly as planned. He is sworn in as the founding chairman of the Holloway County Police Accountability Review Board. The ceremony is simple. He wears a suit. He raises his right hand, the gold ring catching the light, and he takes an oath he has taken many times before in many higher rooms than this one. And then he sits down at the head of a plain table in a plain municipal building, and he opens his small leather notebook, the one a deputy tried to steal. The pages taped carefully back into place. Before we begin our first session, he says, "To the assembled board, to the commissioners, to the citizens who have packed every chair in the room, I want to read a name." He turns to the very first page of the notebook. The earliest entry, 19 months old. This is the name of the first person who came to me. He says, a young woman, pulled over 4 times in 2 months, on her drive home from the night shift. Searched each time. Ticketed for nothing. Because a deputy had decided she didn't belong in her own neighborhood. She filed a complaint. It was dismissed in 2 days. She had nowhere else to go. So she came and sat on my porch and told me her story. And I wrote it down. Because I believed that someday it would matter. And then another person came. And another. For 19 months. They came. And I wrote down everyone. 41 names. 41 people in this county who were treated as suspects in their own lives. And then told, when they dared to object, that nothing had happened at all. He looks up at the room. The room is silent. In the back, near the door, a few of those 41 people are standing, having come to see the old man from the porch take his oath. And some of them are weeping quietly, because for the first time in their lives, someone with power is reading their names out loud, as though those names belong in the record of the world. This board exists for them. Gus says, for every name in this book, for every person who was told that nothing was wrong when everything was wrong, I want you to understand that I did not need this job. I had a quiet life and a porch swing and more tomatoes than I know what to do with. I had earned my rest, and God knows I had buried enough to deserve it. I took this job for one reason, because I spent 22 years on the federal bench writing down what the law requires. The careful words, the binding standards, the bright lines that are supposed to protect every single person in this country, regardless of the color of their skin. And then I came home to the town where I was born, and I sat on my porch, and I watched that law, Mila, the law I helped to write, be ignored, week after week, by the very people sworn to enforce it, against the very people it was written to protect. And I decided I was not going to spend my retirement waving from the porch while it happened to my neighbors. He closes the notebook and sets his hand flat upon its worn leather cover, the way a man rests his hand on a Bible, or on the shoulder of a friend. There is a thing I learned in 22 years of judging. He says, the law is not the words on the page. The law is what happens to the person standing in front of you when no one is watching and no one important will ever know. That is the only place the law actually lives. Everything else is just ink. For 19 months I have been collecting the stories of what happens in this county when no one is watching. Well, people are watching now, and we are going to make the law mean something again. In the only place it has ever mattered. Down here, on the ground, for the person standing in front of us. Every single time, he looks around the table at the assembled board, and then out at the packed and silent room. So let us begin. We have a great deal of work to do, and a great many names to answer for, and we are going to answer for every one of them. Later that evening, after the cameras are gone and the room is empty, Gus drives home in the midnight blue Cadillac, the flat tire long since fixed. He pulls into the driveway at the end of Sycamore Lane, where the porch swing he oils every spring hangs perfectly still in the cooling air. His granddaughter, visiting for the week, comes running out the front door, and he scoops her up, and she wraps her small arms around his neck. And he holds her there a long moment in the last of the light. His neighbor across the street, an older white man who has waved at Gus every day for 15 years without ever once knowing who he was, raises a hand. Gus waves back. Samamon. Same street. Same car. But the world around him is a little different now. Not fixed. Not perfect. But different. And sometimes different is where it starts. Here is what stays with me about this story. Between 2015 and 2024, the Department of Justice opened pattern or practice investigations into more than 20 police departments across the United States. 20. And in nearly every single one, the findings rhymed: systemic bias, broken oversight, a culture that punished the people who spoke up more than the people who did wrong. 20 departments. The same story, over and over and over. Augustus Pemberton was able to hold Cole Hartman accountable for one reason. And it was not justice working the way justice is supposed to work. It was an accident of identity. He happened to be a retired federal judge. He happened to be the incoming chairman of the very board with authority over that department. He happened to have spent 19 months building a record so careful that no one could wave it away. He had the law memorized, the credentials no one could question, the phone numbers that get answered on the first ring. But what about the woman on the night shift, pulled over 4 times for nothing, whose complaint died in 2 days? She did not have a gold ring with a federal court inscription. What about every person who got patted down on the side of the road? Accused without evidence, talked to like they were less than human, and then drove home and sat in their driveway, trying to feel like a whole person again. No notebook, no board seat, no 22 years on the federal bench, just their word. And too often, their word was not enough. The law that Cole Hartman broke does not say the victim has to be a judge. It does not say the victim needs 30 cameras and a county commissioner on speed dial. It says you cannot do what he did to anyone. Period. The badge is supposed to mean you protect people. All people. Not just the ones who look like you, or drive the cars you have decided they are allowed to own. The terrible truth of this story is not that Gus won. It is how rare it is that anyone in his position ever could. He won because he was extraordinary. And the whole point of the law is that you should not have to be extraordinary to be treated as a human being. You should not have to be a federal judge to change a tire in peace. You should not have to memorize the statutes to walk home from work unmolested. You should not need a notebook full of evidence and a seat on an oversight board and 40 years of credentials just to be believed when you say, "I did nothing wrong." The dignity Augustus Pemberton fought for in that parking lot is supposed to belong to everyone. Freely. By birthright. With no proof required. The fact that he had to be the most credentialed man in the county to secure it is not the happy ending. It is the indictment. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged before someone even knew your name? Have you ever had someone take one look at you and decide who you were before you opened your mouth? Before they knew the first true thing about you? Because here is the question Augustus Pemberton would want me to leave you with. He had the badge of the highest credentials in the land. And even he had to fold up an old, too familiar anger and stay perfectly calm with his cheek against the hood of his own car, just to survive an afternoon that should never have happened. So what about the man who has none of that? What about the woman on the night shift? What about every single person who was told nothing was wrong? When everything was wrong, something was wrong. And the only way it ever gets fixed is when enough of us refuse to look away. Think about the math of it for one moment. 41 names in that notebook. 41 human beings in one small county. Over 19 short months. Treated as criminals in their own lives. And every single one of them was told, in writing, that nothing had happened at all. Now multiply that by every county in every state in this country. Multiply it by all the notebooks that were never kept. All the porches with no judge sitting on them. All the complaints that died in 48 hours with no one to resurrect them. That is the true scale of the thing. Augustus Pemberton did not stumble onto a single bad apple. He stumbled onto a machine. A quiet, efficient, well-oiled machine for turning human beings into suspects and then erasing the evidence that it ever happened. And the only reason that machine ever jammed, even once, even in one small county, is that one day it reached out and grabbed the one man in 10 million who had spent his entire life learning exactly how to take a machine like that apart. But remember what he told that silent room on the day he took his oath. The law is not the words on the page. The law is what happens to the person standing in front of you when no one is watching and no one important will ever know. So the real question this story leaves behind is not whether Cole Hartman got what he deserved. He did. The real question is, what happens in all the rooms where there is no camera rolling? No notebook in the pocket. No judge under the gray hair. The real question is who is watching, and what they are willing to do about what they see. Because that, in the end, is the only place the law has ever actually lived. Drop your story in the comments. Because every story matters. And every name belongs in the book. Hit like. Share this with someone who needs to see it. And tell me, honestly, what would you have done in that parking lot? For real?